All right, so our problem that we took on to conquer for Vex Robotics was the shaft collar. And so we kind of came up with a theme for the project was that the more simple, the more brilliant, because we live in a complicated world, and if we can solve the simple problems to increase efficiency, why wouldn't we? So to understand this problem, this video will kind of give you an idea of what the shaft collars do.
And so we take our Allen wrench and try to twist it off.
So this is a brand new shaft that you can see right there, totally unused, no damage on it. And this is a shaft collar that is now stuck on here because the screw is stripped. And so now we have to cut down the shaft and make it a little less usable than it would have been originally, all because of one little shaft collar. So the shaft collar causes many different problems for robots. Like, first off, it causes damage to the shafts. Like, you can see this one is all scratched and beat up all because of the screwing and lots of force that's put on this one simple screw against the shaft. Then we have them that fall off the robots, and that's obviously the biggest problem in competition. Again, just falling off. And then worst of all, they'll get stuck on tools, which then can render the tool useless for us unless we cut it down. And so this is just all such a small part that's causing huge problems in the functions of robots. So we decided to find out how inefficient the shaft collar was by putting together the simple Vex Clawbot and running it through a challenge that we had at school where we had to bring 4 cans and put them into a box. And during this, we ran 20 trials, and of those trials, we had a 30% failure rate, as in a shaft collar would fall off in some way and harm the function of the robot. Now, these all varied, from falling off the claw and making it a little less useful, or up here where it just makes it loose, or they could fall off the wheel, making the robot entirely useless to the competition. So in competition, if this happened, you would have a useless robot and definitely place last because of it. So for our project to improve the shaft collar, we had to define some constraints. And so number one, we only had a certain amount of time. We were limited not only by money, but also by the width at which our 3D printer could print, the type of materials we could use, and this Gantt chart that we made to try to get this done for our project due date and for our competition. And then again, talk about money, because 3D printing can be very expensive, and if this shaft collar that we make is more expensive than the old one, then it might be useless to even do. So the three of us kind of came up with our ideas on our own and agreed that we had to have 2 compression sides, 2 pieces, and a square hole to match the geometry of the shaft. So we all kind of went with our own idea and ran with it. And a lot of our inspiration came from the idea of Legos, because they compress on one another to stay together. And so we figured if we could get something like that to work on our shaft, it would work very well and be very cheap because of the ABS plastic. So here are our ideas, and we printed them off our 3D printer. And basically, our trials were total failures. This one broke, and another version of this one broke. But with the other ones, we couldn't even get them to fit together because they were too small and the components were too fine for our 3D printer. But the only one that didn't consistently fail of our original trials was the design you see here and here. So we decided to take this idea, the 3 of us, and refine it all on our own to try to get it to work. And so we tapered the edges a little more, cut these down, cut that out to make sure that it could flex, and finally came up with our last result. Right here is it going on a robot in Autodesk Inventor. And that's just simply how you do it. You press it onto itself, and it's very simple and can really lock in parts tight, which is fantastic. Now, the really cool thing about this shaft collar is how quickly you can use it. And you simply just have to place all the components on, place something like your wheel on, take a shaft, and put it over the top. And it compresses right up against the wheel, so then there's no wiggle room between the wheel and the robot frame. The other great thing about this shaft is if it gets damaged and you need to make a change, then you can just pull it off without pulling parts off the robot. So the testing we did for this was we all put on 4 wheels onto a robot and timed how long it took. And this is with the new shaft collar, and this is with the old shaft collar. So the average difference was about 33 seconds. So you were even saving time with the new shaft collar. And when we ran it on the test, the same test that we ran with the original one with the Clawbot, we only had a 15% failure rate. And this was just from simple things like maybe it breaking or even misuse by the people who were driving the robot. So that was all right for us. It wasn't a big deal. And so, that's 50% more success than the old shaft collar. Not only that, but we come to the price of the original shaft collars about 66 cents a piece. Whereas ours, when we 3D print it, only costs 55 cents. And if it's injection molded, it's typically about the tenth of the price of a prototype. And so that's about 6 cents per shaft collar. So the decision was pretty obvious to us. The effectiveness was better, the cost was much cheaper, and the building speed was even faster. So it was an obvious decision to go with the new shaft collar.